This lay flat bookmark is the perfect way to keep your cookbook pages from closing, and it's also a great way to keep your place while doing a recipe. So let's get to this easy beginner sewing project that's perfect for the holidays. The materials you'll need in order to make a lay flat bookmark include your fabric choice, the free pattern that you can download. I'll put the link below. You need some scissors, some pins or clips. Then you'll need something to mark the pattern. You can either use a tailor's chalk or a Sharpie, a pen, whatever works. A turning tool is especially helpful for turning the bookmark inside out. And then you'll need some stuffing pellets to put inside the bookmark. If you don't want stuffing pellets, you can use something like sand. You could use small glass beads. There are quite a few options that you can use, but you are going to need about 6 to 7 tablespoons of that. If you'd like to measure it out, you can use the tablespoons, but not necessary. And then a funnel makes it oh so easy. So either a funnel or a piece of paper that you can just roll up and kind of create a makeshift funnel. So those are the supplies you need. So first we're going to trace the pattern piece on 2 layers of fabric. I went ahead and folded a piece of fabric in half, so I'd have 2 layers. However, you can have 2 cut layers, however you want to do it. Now you can download this pattern piece for free. I will put a link in the description and first pinned comment below. And what it is it's 2 of these sides and you tape it together, as you can see right there, which means that this pattern is adjustable. If you want to make it a little bit smaller, you could just overlap this paper a little bit more and tape it over here. If you need to make it a little bit bigger, you can always just add a little bit of paper in between and elongate right in here. And then you are going to trace around the pattern piece. All right, so I did trace around with the tailor's chalk. You could barely see the pink on the red. So I went ahead and traced that over with a Sharpie. So now I added some pins to keep the 2 layers of fabric together. That is especially important so that both of the pattern pieces are going to be the exact same size, especially when you have something that's curved. And this can really be moving around as you are starting to cut it. So go ahead and pin or clip those before you start cutting out the pattern piece. And you can just cut through both of those layers at the same time. I'm going to keep the layers of fabric pinned together, and we're going to bring it over to the sewing machine to sew. Let me jump in real quick and say that I did 2 different seam allowances to make these. This is what you're going to see in the tutorial. This is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I think it was easier to use about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, but this is what the differences are going to look like. So in getting ready to sew this, we are going to be doing a stitch all the way around the entire pattern piece, except for about 2 inches that is going to be on one of the straight sides. I'm going to be using about 1/4 of an inch, which is the width from my needle to the edge of the presser foot. That is what I'm going to be using. You can choose to use even smaller. First of all, I'm going to line up that seam allowance right there and put the edge of the presser foot against the edge of the fabric. Line that up. I'm going to insert the needle in. Oh, sorry about that. Insert the needle into the fabric. I always pull the thread underneath that presser foot and have both the bobbin thread and that thread heading in the back. And now do a few stitches forward, and then I'm going to back stitch a few stitches. This is important because you're going to be kind of pulling on this piece in just a minute when you're filling it, so you just want it to be supported. And now you are going to continue forward stitching all the way around until you get back to that other back side. Now, as you can see, I'm kind of doing it slow because when you get to curves, you just need to take it slow, put the needle in, and you can pick up the presser foot and adjust the direction. So you can see that I'm doing just a little bit, make sure that needle is in there, then I'm gently pressing up the presser foot a little bit maneuvering that fabric just a little bit, continuing on until it's not easy to make that turn anymore without adjusting the fabric. Again, I'm going to make sure that that needle is inserted before I pick up a presser foot. I always seem to stop with the needle up, so then you have to manually, on the side with your knob, if you turn it, you can turn the needle in. You don't have to keep using your foot pedal in order to get the needle down into the fabric. And a little bit more. So that'll leave this amount of gap, and that is going to be used in order to fill the ends. So we've got everything stitched. It's kind of hard to tell because I used thread that would match the fabric. We've got everything stitched except for this opening that is right here. All right, so first of all, before we turn this inside out, I'm going to be clipping the corners. And you can do that by cutting notches, if you would like, into the curved areas, or you could just do snips, which also works. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow that curve to actually be turned inside out a little bit better. Otherwise, you're going to have kind of bunching and puckering around those curved areas. And you can do that all the way around anything that's curved, just for good measure. Be sure not to cut into your stitches. It also reduces some of the bulk. You can see that it's cutting off fabric, and so it does reduce some of the bulk. You can just snip it, but you're still going to have all that fabric there. So you're going to do that on both sides of the pattern piece. Now it's time to turn this inside out. This is going to be a little bit of a maneuvering, I'm not going to lie. So turn it inside out, and there's just going to be kind of like some tugging and pushing and pulling because it is a really tight area. It is trying to get it turned inside out. All right, so I'm continuing to try to get this in. I'm using my turning tool at this point, kind of pushing in that curved area, pushing it out, and then just grasping the fabric with my fingers. And I think if you don't have a turning tool, you can always use like a blunt pencil. I know some people use like chopsticks or knitting needles, but with those pointed ends, just be careful, especially when you're doing something as small and tedious as this. But this is really why we do that back stitching at the beginning and end of the stitching, because you're putting a lot of stress on the fabric. And so if you had just started normal and didn't back stitch at the beginning and end, those stitches might be coming out. So here we go. So I'm using that turning tool and poking out this piece of the curve. See how easy that's going. You could use your fingers, but that would be really, really tight, let me tell you. So doing that, and then I'm going to continue that process on the other side. All right, so very satisfying once you do get it actually turned inside out. So here is what it looks like for now. This is the moment that you want to press this flat, get all the wrinkles out. Now that we've got it all pressed flat, it is time to fill up these curved parts at the end with something that is weighted so that it'll hold down the book pages. We're going to be inserting that weight into the ends through this open gap. And you can use a funnel. So what I'm using is a stuffing pellet, a poly pellet. You can see I got it at the thrift store. It's kind of old. I'll put a link to that thrift store haul in the description. But if you're not familiar with what they are, they're just really hard plastic pellets, usually meant to put into stuffed animals and dolls. but in this case it works as a good weight. Putting that in there, letting those kind of come out in that casing, a little shaking it. So either way that works for you. If you don't have a funnel, use the rolled up paper. If you have a funnel, it's probably going to be a little bit less messy to do it this way. And then just be sure to kind of push those pellets down. If you were using sand or beads, do the same with that. So you just keep doing that. I used about 2 to 3 tablespoons per side, and I'm just going to continue to do that until it's full to just about where it starts to curve. You want to stop about right there. Like if you were looking at this like a Hershey Kiss, right about like the top right there. Okay, I've got this filled up to about right there. I made a mess. I don't know if you did too, but obviously I've got pellets everywhere. So I've got it filled up to right about that curve. Now I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch across so that those pellets do not come into the flat part. Here, and what you're going to do is just a simple straight stitch to secure this. Bring the presser foot down. You do want to back stitch at the beginning and end of your stitching so that it is secure. And here we go. All right, so yeah, looks good. Now I'm going to continue that on this other side. So now that we have both sides stuffed and they are secured with the stitching, it is time to close up this open seam. What I'm going to do is just stitch along the edge. I'm going to stitch close to the folded edge. If you wanted to hand sew this instead of using the sewing machine, definitely could do that. So since I'm going to be using a sewing machine and having stitching over most of this area, I want to have a cohesive look. So I'm going to top stitch along this side as well. For the best results, I'm going to push back all of those beads as far as I can so that I can get my presser foot to lay flat. And then when you get to the end, just try to press those beads all the way back so that you can get a flat fabric. And now your lay flat bookmark is complete. You can get both written instructions and the free pattern at the link that I'll leave in the description below.